The roses appeared every Tuesday night, crimson against the gray headstones. For 3 years, Officer Daniels watched the mysterious offerings materialize at Plot 237, yet never caught the visitor. Tonight, he enlisted Old Thomas, the cemetery's longtime gravedigger, to help solve the puzzle. "Some grief can't be measured by time," Thomas whispered, his weathered hands tracing the inscription. "This one's different, though." Daniel shivered despite the warm evening. The name on the headstone matched a cold case file he'd recently reopened, one containing evidence that contradicted everything about the deceased's official story. Don't forget to subscribe to hear what happens when the midnight visitor finally appears. The cemetery's shadows stretched long as dusk settled over the grounds. Officer Daniels had been with the department for 15 years, but the last 3 had changed him. Once an ambitious detective on track for promotion, he now patrolled the quieter beats of Millfield. His career stalled after the Henderson case went sideways. That case, the same name etched on Plot 237's headstone, had become his obsession, his penance. Thomas watched the officer's face, noting how the lines around his eyes had deepened since they'd first met. "You're carrying something heavy," he observed. Daniels ran a hand through his graying hair. "I was the responding officer that night. The evidence didn't add up, but my superiors closed the case anyway, ruled it an accident." What Daniels couldn't say aloud was how the victim's eyes haunted his dreams. A young woman whose death certificate claimed she'd simply fallen, though the bruising told a different story. He'd pushed for further investigation, but political connections had sealed the file shut. "I just want the truth," Daniels murmured. "Someone knows what really happened." The following morning, Daniels brought his concerns to Captain Reynolds again, file in hand, evidence meticulously organized. The morning briefing room fell silent as Reynolds flipped through the pages with theatrical disinterest. "Still chasing ghosts, Daniels?" Reynolds' voice carried across the room. "This obsession with a closed case is precisely why you're still walking beats instead of leading them." Snickers rippled through the younger officers. Reynolds closed the file with a dismissive snap. "The Henderson family has suffered enough without you dredging up conspiracy theories. The case is closed. The ME signed off. The family accepted the findings." Reynolds handed back the file. "Focus on living criminals, not dead accidents." Heat crawled up Daniel's neck as he collected his papers, some slipping to the floor while colleagues watched. The humiliation burned, but not as much as the knowledge that someone powerful enough to silence an investigation still visited that grave every Tuesday. As he bent to gather the scattered pages, Daniels made a silent promise to the woman in Plot 237. The roses weren't just grief, they were guilt, and he would find who placed them there, even if it cost him what little remained of his career. Thomas and Daniel settled into their hiding spot behind a large mausoleum, the perfect vantage point to observe Plot 237. The night air carried a chill that seeped through their jackets as they waited in silence. 3 hours passed with nothing but the occasional hoot of an owl. "Maybe they won't come tonight," Thomas whispered, checking his watch. Just then, Daniel's phone vibrated. Captain Reynolds' name flashed on the screen. He answered reluctantly. "Daniels, why aren't you responding to dispatch? There's a disturbance at Millfield Plaza that needs attention." "Sir, I'm off duty tonight. I requested personal time 3 days ago." "Which I denied this morning. Check your email. Get to Millfield Plaza now." The call ended abruptly. Daniels looked at Thomas apologetically. "I have to go." "Go on," Thomas nodded. "The roses will be here tomorrow. The truth isn't running anywhere." The next morning, Daniels arrived at the station to find his desk cleared, his personal items stuffed into a cardboard box. Reynolds stood nearby, arms crossed. "You're being reassigned to records management, effective immediately," Reynolds announced, loudly enough for the entire bullpen to hear. "Since you're so interested in old cases, you can spend your days filing them." Officers averted their eyes as Daniels picked up his box. "This is about last night, isn't it?"
Is about insubordination and unhealthy fixations," Reynolds replied. "You were seen at the cemetery again, by a councilman who was visiting his mother's grave. He was concerned about police resources being wasted." Daniels felt the walls closing in. "Councilman Henderson, the victim's uncle? Watch yourself, Daniels. One more misstep and you'll be turning in your badge." The basement records room was damp and poorly lit. Daniels spent the day organizing files, his mind racing. When his shift ended, he headed straight to the cemetery, finding Thomas tending to a fresh grave. "They're trying to bury me too," Daniels said bitterly. Thomas leaned on his shovel. "Powerful people don't like being disturbed." The following week brought the final blow. Daniels arrived at work to find internal affairs officers waiting. They escorted him to a conference room where Reynolds and the police chief sat with stern expressions. "Officer Daniels, we're placing you on administrative leave pending investigation," the chief announced. "Your personal vehicle was spotted at the Henderson estate last night. The family has filed a harassment complaint." "That's impossible," Daniels protested. "I was home all night." Reynolds slid photographs across the table. Daniels' car parked near the Henderson mansion. "Your obsession has crossed the line," Reynolds said. "Turn in your badge and gun." As Daniels left the station, humiliation burning in his chest, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the library archives. I can help." The sender was Eliza Winters, the county's digital archivist. She led him to a private room filled with computers. "I heard what happened," she said. "It's not right." "How can you help?" Daniels asked, desperation edging his voice. Eliza's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing systems with surprising ease. "Before I worked here, I was in digital forensics for the FBI. Left after a disagreement about a case similar to yours." She pulled up traffic camera footage from the previous night, showing Daniels' car being driven by someone else. Then she accessed the Henderson estate's security system. "They don't know I can do this," she said quietly. "And they don't know what else I found in the digital archives. The Henderson case file was altered after it was digitized. I have the original scan." For the first time in weeks, Daniels felt a flicker of hope. His career might be crumbling, but he just found an ally with skills that could finally uncover the truth about Plot 237. From his penthouse office overlooking the city, Mayor Henderson watched the surveillance feed of Daniels and Eliza. He tapped his gold ring against the desk, then picked up his phone. "Find out what they know," he ordered, "and prepare contingencies." Thomas Daniels had always been good at one thing that few people knew about: digital forensics. Before joining the police force, he'd spent 3 years in the Army Cyber Division, a skill set he'd deliberately kept off his department resume. In a small town where connections mattered more than competence, he'd learned that exceptional abilities often made people uncomfortable. As Eliza worked her magic on the archives, Daniels pulled out his personal laptop. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already connecting to the library's guest network through a VPN he maintained. Eliza glanced over, eyebrows raised. "You know your way around a keyboard?" "Let's just say my personnel file doesn't tell the whole story." His fingers moved with practiced precision, bypassing security protocols with ease. "The Army taught me more than how to shine my boots." Within minutes, he'd accessed the police department server logs. "Someone's been altering files from an IP address that doesn't belong to the station." He showed Eliza the screen. "This address belongs to the mayor's office," Eliza finished, leaning closer. "I found similar patterns in the archive access logs." Daniels nodded grimly. "They're covering something up, but they made mistakes. Amateur mistakes." For the next several hours, they worked in tandem, Daniels focusing on the digital trail while Eliza pieced together the original case files. The library emptied around them, but the night librarian, an elderly woman who'd known Daniel since he was a boy, brought them coffee and pretended not to notice their increasingly animated discussions. "Look at this," Daniel said finally, turning his.
Tom asked to Scotter, screen toward Eliza. The original autopsy report on Rose Henderson. The digital version shows natural causes, but the metadata contains fragments of the original text. Cause of death was initially listed as suspicious circumstances, possible poisoning. Eliza's eyes widened. "That matches what I found in the paper archives. The medical examiner requested toxicology tests, but they were never completed. The case was closed too quickly." "By Detective Reynolds," Daniels added, the pieces falling into place, "who was then promoted to captain within a month." "And look at this," Eliza said, pulling up property records. "The land where Rose Henderson's house stood was rezoned for commercial use 3 months after her death. The Henderson Foundation made millions developing it into that shopping complex on the east side." Daniels felt a chill.
So Mayor Henderson, then just Councilman Henderson, had financial motives. But why would his own niece be targeted? Eliza pulled up another document. Because she wasn't his niece. I found Rose's original birth certificate. She was his half-sister from his father's second marriage. And according to the will I just found in the county records, she stood to inherit the majority of the Henderson estate, which would have prevented the land development, Daniels concluded. Follow the money. But we still don't know who's been leaving the Roses, Eliza said. Daniels stared at the screen, thinking about Thomas the Gravedigger. I think I might. And I think it's time we paid another visit to Plot 237. They left the library just before midnight, the streets empty and dark. Neither noticed the black sedan parked across the street, nor the man inside who made a quiet phone call as they drove away. The cemetery was eerily silent under the waning moon. Thomas was waiting for them by the maintenance shed, his weathered face grave. I figured you'd come back, he said, leading them through the rows of headstones. Especially after what they did to you. You know more than you've been telling me, Daniel said, not accusingly, but with certainty. Thomas nodded slowly. Had to be sure you were the right one to tell. Too many people in this town look the other way when the Hendersons are involved. They reached Rose's grave, where a fresh rose lay on the marble. You've been leaving these, Daniel said. Not me. Thomas shook his head. Her. From the shadows behind a nearby mausoleum, a slender figure emerged. An elderly woman with silver hair and familiar eyes. Henderson eyes. This is Margaret, Thomas said, Rose's mother. They told everyone I died years ago. My son, your mayor, had me committed to a private facility after I started asking questions about Rose's death. I escaped 6 months ago. Thomas has been helping me stay hidden. You've been leaving the Roses, Eliza said. Margaret nodded. It was our tradition. Every Sunday we'd cut roses from our garden. When I finally made it back here and saw her grave, I had to let her know her mother hadn't abandoned her. Mrs. Henderson, Daniel said gently, we have evidence that your daughter's death wasn't natural, that there was a cover-up involving your son and the police department. I know, she replied, tears glistening in her eyes. Rose found financial irregularities in the family foundation. She told me she was going to confront Michael the night she died. Daniels and Eliza exchanged glances. This was the missing piece. Motive, opportunity, and now testimony from a witness the conspirators thought was safely locked away. We need to get you somewhere safe, Daniel said. All of you. Once we go public with this, the mayor and Reynolds will do anything to silence us. As if summoned by his words, headlights swept across the cemetery gates. 2 police cruisers pulled up, their lights off. They followed us, Eliza whispered. Daniel's mind raced. They were trapped, and he no longer had a badge or gun. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. Back exit by the old chapel. Car waiting. Hurry. He showed the others. Someone's helping us. It's our only chance. They moved quickly through the darkness, Thomas leading them along paths only he knew. Behind them, flashlight beams cut through the night as officers spread out among the graves. The chapel loomed ahead, its stained glass windows dark. Behind it, as promised, idled a car with tinted windows. The back door opened as they approached. "Get in," said a familiar voice. District Attorney James Porter, the mayor's longtime political rival, sat in the back seat. "My secretary overheard Reynolds ordering your arrest on fabricated charges. I've been watching this situation unfold for weeks." They piled in, the car pulling away just as flashlights appeared around the chapel corner. "Why help us?" Daniels asked as they sped through back roads. "Because Rose Henderson came to my office the day before she died," Porter replied grimly. "She didn't trust the police. She gave me documents, insurance, she called it. I've been building a case ever since, but I needed more. When I saw you getting close, I kept tabs on you." "You have proof?" Eliza asked. Porter nodded. "And now, with Mrs. Henderson alive and your digital evidence, we have enough to bring down the mayor and everyone involved." As they drove toward the state police headquarters in the next county, Daniels looked back at the town that had nearly buried him alongside its secrets. By morning, the truth about Plot 237 would finally see daylight. "You know," Porter said, breaking the silence, "this town has needed someone like you for a long time, Daniels, someone who doesn't look away." Daniels thought about the roses, faithfully delivered by a mother who refused to forget, about Thomas, quietly keeping watch, about Eliza, risking her career to uncover the truth. "I'm not the only one," he said softly. The car continued into the night, carrying its cargo of secrets and those brave enough to tell them. What about you? Have you ever stood up against powerful forces in your community? Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories of everyday courage from around the world. The car suddenly swerved as Porter's phone rang. His face paled as he answered. "They've breached my office safe. The original documents are gone. And my assistant—" His voice broke. "They're saying it was a heart attack, but we know better." The car fell silent as Porter's words hung in the air. Daniels felt a chill run through him. Another life lost to the conspiracy they were fighting against. Mrs. Henderson clutched her daughter's hand, her weathered face set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. "They're eliminating evidence," Daniels said, his mind racing, "and witnesses." Porter nodded grimly. "Without those documents, we're in a much weaker position. We have your digital evidence and Mrs. Henderson's testimony, but against the mayor's influence. We need to go public immediately," Eliza insisted, "before they can silence anyone else." Thomas, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "There's something else, something I never told anyone." All eyes turned to him. "I didn't just tend the cemetery. I documented everything. Every visitor, every unusual occurrence. When Rose started leaving flowers, I photographed the graves, the dates, the patterns. I have a journal going back 15 years. That could corroborate Mrs. Henderson's testimony," Porter said, a spark of hope returning to his voice. "It's in my groundskeeper's cottage," Thomas continued, "hidden beneath a floorboard under my bed." Daniels checked his watch. The state police are still 2 hours away. If we wait, that journal might disappear too. "We need to split up," Porter decided. "I'll take Mrs. Henderson to the state police headquarters. The rest of you retrieve that journal." "It's too dangerous," Eliza protested. "The local police are looking for all of us." "Which is why we need a distraction," Daniel said, an idea forming. "Something to draw attention away from the cemetery while we get in and out." Porter's phone buzzed with a news alert. He read it aloud. "Breaking. Mayor Callahan to hold emergency press conference at City Hall regarding police corruption at 11 p.m. "He's getting ahead of the story," Eliza said bitterly, "framing you as the corrupt one." Daniels checked the time. 10:30 p.m. "That's our distraction. If I show up at that press conference, every officer in town will be focused on me." "That's suicide," Thomas objected. "Not if I'm just buying time. I'll go in the front door of City Hall while you and Eliza retrieve the journal. Once you have it, text Porter. He'll alert his contacts in the media and the state police. We go public with everything simultaneously. Too many channels for them to silence."
No one liked the plan, but no one had a better one. Porter dropped them off at different locations, Eliza and Thomas near the cemetery's back entrance, and Daniels a block from City Hall. "Be careful," Eliza said before they parted, her hand lingering on his arm. "Reynolds will be there." "I'm counting on it," Daniels replied. As he approached City Hall, Daniels could see news vans already assembled. Police cruisers lined the street, officers standing guard at every entrance. The mayor was taking no chances. Daniels pulled his jacket collar up and kept his head down until he reached the crowd of reporters gathering at the main steps. Inside the cemetery, Thomas led Eliza through the darkness, avoiding the main paths. They could see flashlight beams in the distance, officers still searching for them. The groundskeeper's cottage sat in a secluded corner, shadowed by ancient oak trees. "There's likely someone watching my place," Thomas whispered as they crouched behind a mausoleum. Eliza pointed to a police cruiser parked near the cottage. "Just one officer. Can we get in another way?" Thomas nodded. "There's a cellar entrance hidden by shrubs on the north side." At City Hall, the press conference was beginning.
Daniels slipped into the back of the room just as Mayor Callahan approached the podium, flanked by Chief Reynolds and several city council members. The mayor looked confident, composed, a man in control. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Callahan began. "It is with deep regret that I must inform you of a disturbing development within our police department." Daniels moved slowly along the wall, positioning himself where the mayor would eventually see him. His phone vibrated, a text from Eliza. At the cottage, officer outside, working on distraction. Back at the cemetery, Eliza picked up a heavy branch while Thomas prepared to make his move. She hurled it far into the darkness, where it crashed loudly against a headstone. The officer's head snapped toward the sound, and he drew his weapon. "Police, who's there?" he called out, moving cautiously toward the noise. Thomas and Eliza slipped around to the north side of the cottage, pushing through overgrown shrubs to find the cellar doors. They were padlocked. "I haven't used these in years," Thomas whispered, frustration evident in his voice. Eliza pulled out a small multi-tool from her pocket. "Good thing I came prepared." At City Hall, the mayor was building his narrative. Former Detective Daniels, who was suspended pending an internal investigation, has gone rogue. He has interfered with an ongoing investigation, tampered with evidence, and is now evading arrest. Daniels chose that moment to step forward. "Is that what we're calling it when an officer uncovers corruption, Mr. Mayor?" The room erupted. Cameras swiveled toward him, reporters shouted questions, and officers moved to apprehend him. Chief Reynolds' face contorted with rage. "Arrest him," Reynolds barked. Daniels raised his hands, but continued speaking loudly enough for the cameras to catch every word. "The public deserves to know about Plot 237 and the 16 bodies buried there. They deserve to know why Rose Henderson was silenced when she discovered the truth." In the cottage, Thomas lifted the floorboard beneath his bed, retrieving a weathered leather journal and a small box of photographs. "This is everything," he said, handing them to Eliza. She quickly photographed key pages with her phone, sending them directly to Porter with the message, "Evidence secured. Go public now." At City Hall, officers had reached Daniels, grabbing his arms. He didn't resist, but kept his eyes locked on the mayor. "Tell them about the development deal, Callahan. Tell them about the homeless people who disappeared. Tell them why you had to silence Rose Henderson." The mayor's composed facade cracked slightly. "This man is delusional. Get him out of here." Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. Eliza's message had come through. He smiled as the officers began to drag him away. "It's too late," he called out. "The truth is already out there." Reynolds stepped forward, his voice low enough that only Daniels could hear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. By morning, any evidence you think you have will be gone, and so will anyone connected to it." Daniels met his gaze steadily. "Check your phone." As if on cue, reporters' phones began buzzing throughout the room. Breaking. News alerts, social media notifications. Porter had delivered. Reynolds' phone chimed. He glanced down, his face draining of color as he saw the headline, "Mass Grave Cover-Up. State Police Launch Investigation into Riverview Cemetery Plot 237. The chief looked up at Daniels, then at the mayor, who was being bombarded with questions from suddenly aggressive reporters. Reynolds' hand moved toward his service weapon, his eyes wild with desperation. Daniels saw the motion and realized he faced an impossible choice: lunge for the weapon and risk being shot as a threatening suspect, or do nothing and risk Reynolds opening fire in a room full of witnesses to silence the story once and for all. Time slowed as Reynolds' fingers brushed against his holster. Daniels calculated his odds, minimal at best. The room's chaos provided both cover and witnesses, a double-edged sword. Before Daniels could act, a firm hand clamped down on Reynolds' vest. "I wouldn't do that, Chief." It was Captain Martinez from Internal Affairs, her voice steady but her eyes hard as flint. "State police are already securing the cemetery. It's over." Reynolds' face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and attempted murder," Martinez replied, nodding to two officers who moved in to secure Reynolds. "Your service weapon, please." The mayor watched the scene unfold, his political instincts finally overriding his panic. He stepped to the microphone, his voice quavering slightly. "These are deeply disturbing allegations that my administration takes very seriously. I've just authorized a full independent investigation and will cooperate fully with state authorities. A reporter shouted, "Mayor Callahan, did you authorize the cover-up of 16 bodies to push through the Riverview development project?" "Absolutely not," Callahan replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "If crimes were committed, they were done without my knowledge." Daniels caught the mayor's eye. "The Journal has your signature, Callahan, page 43. The order to relocate the undesirables who were camping on the development site." The color drained from Callahan's face. He'd signed hundreds of documents, trusted Reynolds to handle the vagrant problem discreetly. He never asked questions when the encampment disappeared overnight. Plausible deniability, the politician's shield, was crumbling before the cameras. Outside the cemetery, Thomas watched as forensic teams carefully excavated Plot 237. Eliza stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Rose would be proud," she said softly. Thomas nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. 20 years I've tended these graves, knowing something wasn't right. Rose was the only one brave enough to say it. At City Hall, the press conference had devolved into chaos. Reynolds sat handcuffed, staring vacantly at the floor. The mayor was surrounded by aides, desperately trying to craft a statement that might salvage his career. Daniel stood to the side, watching justice unfold. Messy, imperfect, but justice nonetheless. Captain Martinez approached him. "You took one hell of a risk, Daniels." "Worth it," he replied simply. "The department will need to rebuild trust with the community," she continued. "We could use someone who understands the importance of integrity." Daniels shook his head. "I'm done with badges, but I know someone who'd be perfect for community liaison." He nodded toward the doors where Eliza had just entered, her eyes scanning the room until they found his. 3 months later, the Riverview Memorial was dedicated. 16 stone roses for 16 forgotten souls. The development project had been scrapped, the land converted to a public garden. Mayor Callahan had resigned in disgrace, facing charges of criminal negligence and conspiracy after the fact. Reynolds awaited trial on more serious charges, his plea deals rejected by prosecutors with ironclad evidence. Thomas stood before the memorial daily, tending the real roses that visitors left. Sometimes Eliza joined him, sometimes Daniels. The three unlike allies had formed a bond forged in shared purpose. "It's not perfect," Thomas said one evening as the sun set over the garden. "Those people are still gone. Their families still don't know what happened to them. But they're remembered now," Eliza replied. "They matter." Daniels nodded, watching as Thomas dutifully arranged a fresh rose at the base of the memorial. "Sometimes that's all we can do. Make sure they're remembered. Make sure it doesn't happen again." Thomas straightened up, his gravedigger's hands gentle with the flowers. "Rose always said the dead speak through the living who remember them. Now they have a voice." Thomas settled into his new routine with a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. Each morning he would arrive at the Riverview Memorial Garden before sunrise, tending to the roses with meticulous care. The weight that had pressed upon his shoulders for 2 decades had finally lifted. Visitors came daily now, some to pay respects, others simply drawn to the peaceful sanctuary the garden had become. Thomas would nod politely, occasionally sharing stories of the 16 souls commemorated there, ensuring their memory lived on. Eliza had been appointed the community liaison for the police department, working to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the city's most vulnerable. Daniels had opened a private investigation firm, focusing on cold cases and missing persons. Both visited Thomas regularly, their unlikely friendship a testament to what could be accomplished when people stood together for truth. One crisp autumn morning, as Thomas was pruning the rose bushes, he noticed a small envelope tucked beneath one of the memorial stones. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman and a handwritten note. There were 17. Thomas's hands trembled as he studied the photograph. The woman's eyes seemed to stare directly into his, pleading for recognition. He glanced around the empty garden, suddenly aware of being watched. Near the entrance gates, a figure in a dark coat turned and walked away, leaving behind footprints in the morning dew. If you found this story intriguing, please subscribe to our channel for more mysterious tales like this one. Hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think left the photograph?